Hi everyone, this is Cecile
and Fanny
from Petite Creme, and we are here today to talk about
potty training.
Yay! Potty training. Yes, it's an important topic for babies and for kids and for parents.
Yeah.
So please come on in. Hello. Hi. We're gonna add to the chat our Varisa Perlman, so she's going to join us in a second so that we can talk about all this beautiful milestone of potty training.
Yeah, can be beautiful or challenging, depend on what side.
I wouldn't necessarily call it beautiful, like but it can be rewarding. It can be convenient for parents because once you go through that step, it's
once you're done.
Yes.
And done. It's a better pace for the parent.
It's an important milestone because that's one of the first steps to regain or to gain some of that independence for your kids. So which means as a parent, it gives you a little more comfort. So hi, good morning. Have a good day too. Thank you for your comments. So while we're waiting for Dr. Perlman, if any of you have current challenges with potty training, if you are about to face the period of potty training, write down in the comments why you're here, besides knowing us, because I know some of you know us.
Hi, how are you?
You're sideways.
Here we go.
Yeah,
there we go.
Perfect.
Sorry about that.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay.
We were just asking everyone to write down in the comments what is their
challenge or question.
Or current journey with potty training. If you're about to embark on this topic, if you are deep into it right now, if you are done with this and you're here to just share your knowledge, please write down in the comments so we can tackle that. We're curious to see why you are here, and we are really appreciative of everybody being here. Hi, everyone. Yeah, we're trying to wave at everyone.
Yeah. We're still learning about the live.
Good.
We're getting better and better.
I think each time we get better and better.
Yeah,
I think we get better and better at it. I kind of caught a little bit of what you're saying while I was trying to get on. The idea is that, again, we had talked about picky eating last time.
Yes.
And we talked a little bit about I feel like they're like moments or arenas where you're negotiating your relationship with your kid. I don't want to make it more than it should be, but in many ways, I feel like the whole process you're completely joined to them, obviously, because they come out of your womb, right? You're as joined as you could be, And I feel like the first kind of 20 years of your life with them is negotiating how you and your relationship with them is going to be. There are moments that you'll dance very closely, and there are moments where you do need to be a little apart, right? That you need your independence, they need their independence. So in many ways, that dance comes through in different situations. And I think one of them, the first ones, I think, is food. I think that's a place where, you give them their space to kind of express themselves and to also fumble and to kind of learn and to grow. And it should be, again, a joyful experience. These should be joyful experience. Potty training, people don't usually describe it as a joyful experience, right? It's not something that we really attach joy to.
Right? Whatever comes in has to come out, right? It's the cycle of life.
But that being said, I think that in many ways, it gives you a really interesting view in that moment to understand a little bit about the temperament of your kid. And I think that all of those glances and those glimpses, they really inform you at different points as you go along in this journey or path with this person, right, that you're growing, literally, right? And allows you to understand, what are their needs, right? And so much of potty training, when we look back at maybe a generation before us, was, there was a book, and everyone was like, they should all be potty trained by this age exactly, right? And it was a lot of pressure there was a lot of pressure, and it varied from culture to culture. But I felt like that, as we came to another generation, we started realizing that we've had a lot of kids that really did struggle with their stools, their bowels, and the control of it. And it wasn't one size fits all by any means. And in that process, I think that we started kind of like broadening the time, so that some kids really potty training came to them very early. They felt it is a strike of independence, to be able to like not be changed, and to kind of go on your own when you feel like you have to go. That's a huge statement for a kid to make.
Yeah,
a huge decision. It's a big deal. And I think that we have a responsibility as a parent, to not only listen to our kids and see what their needs are, but to also kind of create this like very like judgment-free zone. Because if we attach it similarly to food, like, oh, if you're really good, I'll give you this food. Like food should not be, food is nutrition, right? It should not be that kind of like bargaining tool, right? And I'm not saying that there isn't bargaining with potty training, so that's not what I'm saying, but it's that kind of thing of like, why can't you do this? What's wrong with you? Why, and I think that that's where we start to kind of walk into a space where the tug and pull, it becomes much deeper and more complicated than it needs to be.
Yeah. So let's tackle some of the questions or comments or questions we got also through emails and our social feed. So one of the questions is, how do we know when? So let's talk first about people who are about to embark on this journey. They're currently changing diapers. We know it's coming. What are the trigger? What's the right time frame? As you said, it's not by the book with a certain number, but how do parents know when the time is there?
Yeah. So I try to make things simple, because as parents, we have very little headspace for like complicated explanations. So something snappy always seems to like stick in your head a lot better. I say 3 different things. One is fluffy, happy poop. I'll go back to describe that. Fluffy, happy poop, okay? Lots of speech, okay? And lots of interest. Okay? And I start with the fluffy, happy poop, because one of the things that we see, especially as pediatricians, is that when it's a situation where there's a little bit of a tug and pull, and there's a little bit of constipation, there's a little bit of a hard stool, kids are not trying to make this complicated, but what they'll do is that they'll just withhold. If it hurts when it comes out, they're like, well, just as you're like trying to encourage them to go when they should, they're like, but I can also stop it when I want to. Like, like it's a double-edged sword, So a lot of times, if you have constipation, I find I always kind of pause us for like maybe about a month to really correct that constipation. So poops are fluffy and happy, so that when they come out, they don't hurt. Because
so that tied back, I would say, then to the conversation we had last time about food. Then on episode 2, when we talked about eating, where to manage some of that flow of feces is also through the food. Then it's again, it's tied together, right?
This is all linked together. We're doing different talks, but they all link together, because again, if they're not eating well, they're eating a lot of processed foods, they're eating a lot of grains, they're drinking a lot of milk, things that they're not drinking a lot of water, especially as toddlers. You have a situation where it's not just the frequency, it's the consistency of the poop. So I say fluffy. I know it sounds weird, but fluffy is better. You think
fluffy is cute. Like it's
fluffy is fantastic. When it's just
sounds
fluffy,
like a pillow.
And it's just kind of, and then fluffy and happy, where it like just pops out. Like that's how you know that you have good, healthy stools. If you're having a situation where they're straining, they're small stools. The small stools are a product of the fact that the space, the movement, the transit through the colon is slowed down. So instead of kind of going through and then the water being absorbed, it's staying in the colon. And the longer it stays there, the more water comes out of it, and the water comes out of it, it gets harder and smaller. So harder stools will actually make them, they just can't move them. They just can't go through. And so in that scenario, it's a very, you just kind of potentially walking into trouble.
So what's okay frequency for poop? Because I know when we go to pediatrician visit, the pediatrician asks how many stool like a day, how many pees, and I'm always like, I don't know, I don't know, but like what's a reasonable number so for people to know? Okay, that's a regular flow, and that's.
I would love to go. I would love for them to poop every day, but not everyone does that. So I would say maybe every 2 to 3 days at the most. You know, I'd like for them to do at least once a day. Some kids do it twice a day. You know, that is a very like kind of personal thing on them. That being said, it's not just the frequency, right? We should be actually asking about the consistency. So look at the kid. If they're really straining, like they're literally like having to hide, and they're like really really straining like in their diaper, let's correct that. Let's get that kind of a little bit softer where it just kind of shows up and you're like, oh yeah, I guess they pooped. You know, that's like kind of like the best scenario, you know, and it's a little bit messier. It's a little bit, you know, but in many ways that is a much easier stool to pass.
Okay. So you mentioned then also speech and lots of.
And then so lots of speech. The reason why I use speech, and it doesn't have to be a ton of speech, but there has to be some speech. I think there was a hot sec where a lot of people were training at like 9 months, you know, 10 months. And I think that is a little premature because I think the speech and the communications piece is just developing there. So I think that's a really hard one. But speech only because they do need to be able to articulate a little bit about what they're, you know, what they need to do. You know, they're about to go, and you know, your interaction has to be there. It's not a non-starter, but in many ways, the more speech you have, the better in terms of like having a good, productive communication. And then lots of interests, you know, like, you know, put the potty out there, read the books, you know, if you have friends who have kids who are potty trained, send them in the room with them. I mean, you know, like my son will be completely, but like we would send him in the room with like older cousins and be like, hey, like look what he's doing. I mean, you know, look at what your siblings
like peer pressure, peer like inspiration, competition, right?
And sometimes that's why school is kind of good, because in the school setting, somebody was kind of asking about school, and in the school setting, when they're starting to see other kids going, there is a little bit of a piqued interest, like, oh, well, why do they get to go there? And like, I have to lay down here and get changed. So peer pressure can sometimes be good. So that's not always a bad thing, you know? And then, you know,
just to, because we got a question on the chat regarding the school and preschool.
Yes.
So there is a mom who is telling us, and I think is asking that her 3-year-old son refused to use the potty, and that's a different experience from her daughter who was potty trained overnight at 2 years old, and her problem is that she cannot enroll him in preschool. So because preschool require most of the time your kids to be potty trained. So what would be like your advice, because you were speaking about speech, and so that's the question that we got.
So I saw that question, so I wanted to address that. So first of all, that's a good lesson, right? You didn't clone them, right? Unfortunately, one will do one thing, and literally sometimes the second will do the opposite. So like every kid is like from scratch. You have to go to
every kid is different, right?
There's no cheating. There's no cheating, right? They're all going to be different. So that's the first little lesson of that one, you know? And the second one is that, yes, there are schools that will not allow you to go in if you are not potty trained. Now, 3 years old is an interesting age, right? Because there is a good amount of speech development, a decent amount, right? You know, it's interesting because sometimes you can see through the eyes of the kids. Sometimes some kids are like, again, my husband will be completely flabbergasted by this. He had a much older brother, and his much older brother realized when he was like, he would, you know, my husband would be like, I have to be changed. He was very vocal. And the older brother would be like, if you can tell me I need to be changed, right? Like, you can go. And he said, no, I like watching you take my diapers out to the trash.
Oh, that's interesting.
A lot of times, sometimes there is like an actual, like thinking that they're actually at that age, they're like, wow, you know, I want to be the baby still. I want to stay in the diapers. And I know I'm kind of like, but kids have these ideas. I know that sounds kind of like, at one moment you might say, hey, sweetie, and I'm not trying to say that judge them, you know, but say, hey, why don't you want to go potty? Like if you go potty, you get to go to, you get to go to school, and they may say, some of them may say, I don't want to go to school. So
yeah, maybe that's the point.
Right.
Like maybe you
Right,
should go like,
there's always a little something, Now, you always have in your back pocket, we call it the, diaperless weekend, right? Where it's like cold turkey, right? Where it's like literally like, I'm going to take their diaper off. I mean, we've all heard people do this, right? No diapers for the whole weekend, right? Now they might have
that's the French.
Right?
The French people do that often. Like it's very common in France to do. Okay, this weekend we no out of the house and we leave the diaper out and
So it becomes a situation where they can actually, you can kind of like get into their head. You can. I always believed, and first of all, every kid's different, so don't use the same strategy that you used with the last one. Okay, that's a really big rule, because a lot of times we try to like go from our past book. It doesn't work. Look at the kid and through their perspective, what would incentivize them? You may say, I'm going to take your diaper off, and if you go potty into that potty. So sometimes the reward system works, not on the negative, not that I'm going to punish you if you don't go, but every time you sit on that potty, I'm going to give you a star. After 10 stars, buy something, right, that you can taunt them with. Like, hey, that thing is yours after 10 stars. That's something that you can do with a 3-year-old. That is possible to do with a 3-year-old, right? And again, I'm really not encouraging you to punish them if they don't go to it. But you want to do a positive reinforcement where, like, you sit in that potty and you may or may not go. You may or may not go. But to sit on that potty, and you should try, then you get a star. And you can
one tip that I read, and I didn't apply it for myself because it was after my potty training years, but I thought was different from anything I had read, was sitting the kids with the diaper on the toilet or the potty. Because then it came to my mind that they used to stand or lay down when they're pooping, and maybe that position of like being sitting might not be the most natural. So would you say that that's also a good transition step to be, you're sitting, you're in your diaper, so there's nothing about anything coming out, but at least you're experiencing pooping in that sitting position?
And I think these are all, like, I think what we're all saying is that it's not going to happen overnight.
No.
That you have to kind of like a little trial and error. And if you do have a situation where it's like, okay, by the fall, right, of next year, I need to have a potty trained kid, right? Then give yourself goals. Okay, so this month, this is what we're going to do. Next month, this is what we're going to do. Because sometimes you have to be a little bit more deliberate with yourself even. Because it is a bit of a sacrifice, the whole kind of like, are we going to carry, if you're going, I had some families that were like, I'm about to potty train, but literally we're going on a 24-hour flight. And I'm not, so it's kind of like, you have to kind of know your schedule too. Maybe the holidays, it's not a good time because there's 35 people in the house,
And you set yourself for success, right? You try to put you in a situation where you have the most chances of succeeding.
Right.
Otherwise, you're gonna put more pressure on your kids because
and on you
and you also on your kids. That's for sure.
You pressure on you ends up being pressure on the kid, right?
Exactly.
You're just like so anxious for them to do it, and then they can feel all that energy, and then it becomes more than it needs to be. The last thing you want to do is have them withhold or get weird on it just to prove a point to you. You don't want this to be an arena. Giving someone independence and confidence is very different than creating a power struggle. And you can do one of two ways, and I found many forks in the road, right? We're like, I'm either going to kind of create this to be an empowerment moment, right? Or I'm going to make this a power struggle.
And sometimes that line is very blurry with kids.
Very blurry.
We do have control, as you said earlier, when they are inside us, we have full control. And then it's giving more control, but we also have full power over them when they're little. So giving away some of that strength to control them is hard. It's hard
and scary.
Right? It's hard, it's scary, but I have to tell you, from the long game, it works. To create a confident, healthy adult, a confident, healthy, like 18-year-old that feels confidence about what they can do. It's small tweaks, small steps along the way that have literally like you have literally placed some of your confidence coins into their bank. So that as you go, you're like, you were able to do this, you were able to do this. But I think that the power struggle, I think that, and I'm not saying that you should never punish kids, but I think that boundaries is something that we talked about with the picky eating, right? There are obviously boundaries. I mean, we don't want like a 10-year-old who can't poop. I mean, like, we're not talking about that. And everyone does eventually get potty trained. So like have that in mind. But you also want to make it a situation where like they feel like they are gaining something from it. And that can only be figured out if you are sitting in their gaze, like in their body, in their space.
That's interesting, because I think that's one of those instances where as parents, we feel like we are driving. And the preschool example is really good, where society is telling us it's now. It's now, so parents have pressure, and it has an impact on the whole family. So now the kid is taking on that pressure when it's not his call, right, or her call. So
it just isn't part of it. It's their body. They're learning how to control their body at the right time.
And they don't want to feel guilty about it if they can't, because sometimes it's just, it's difficult to be mindful of it if they're playing, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, the potty, so we're interrupting. So it's hard for them to even know how to do it.
I think that schedule, this is something else that might help the person that we were talking about. Schedule is really important, right? So some people go in the morning, some people go when they come home, like, and I'm talking about number 2. Number 1 is also the same idea, right? You have to know your kid, right? And if you have a situation where, my kid really likes to poop in the morning, but we got to go. So I'm rushing them to go and go poop. If anyone's yelling, go poop at someone, everyone will not poop. Like, I don't care who you are, no one's going to poop, right? So in many ways, that's on you. That's not on them. Like, you have to wake them up, like maybe another half an hour earlier. So it's like a nice, calm, judgment-free zone. Because honestly, like, if they don't poop in that morning, they may actually start to get constipated, because now they're at school and they can't go the whole day. It becomes this very strange, kind of like a kind of pattern. Someone just wrote, can you bring your child in with you? I don't see a problem with that, because again, we're just normalizing the pattern, right? Like, so like, when mommy wakes up in the morning, mommy pees, right? Because we haven't peed all day. Do you want to pee with me? Like, the same thing with eating, picky eating, it's the kind of thing like, let's eat lunch together. Let's eat breakfast together. There's a lot of that good modeling.
And they see something is different than using words, because we also sometimes don't understand how much of the word they understand. The kids are super smart and they understand, but you don't know if the one word that you're putting in front of them is the one that they don't understand. So seeing it, that's what peeing is, that's what pooping is, that's what a potty is, that's what a bathroom is, then they can experience it through somebody else and mimic it, right?
Yeah, completely. Modeling, and again, going back to that modeling, making something normal, something a part of life, like, this is good for your body because, it kind of gets rid of all the stuff so that it used all the energy that it needed to, so it needs to get it out. It's a good thing. Versus like, you'll make mommy so happy if you do this, right? Like, do you see how there's like a subtle difference there? It's like you're trying to teach them that they're trying to do these things so that their body will be healthier. Very similar to food. Like, if you eat this, mommy's going to be so proud of you. No, if you eat it, it's actually really good nutrients for your body. Listen, we need to think that. Like, we need to think like that too, because in many ways we've kind of like emotionalized a lot of stuff when really these are like bodily functions. And if they don't go well and you can't hear your body and listen to when your body needs you to listen to it, life gets kind of funky later, so the sooner you can teach them that process, so that it's not so emotionally laden, I think that you create a healthier context in the way that they actually learn how to potty train. We talked a lot about poop, but pee is just as important, because again, a lot of times with peeing, there's a whole issue where I'm playing. No, it's a lot easier sometimes to hold pee. Oh no, I'm peeing. I'm playing, right? The problem with that, and it's the same mechanism with constipation, is that they're stretching, right? So there's either stretching of the bladder or there's stretching of the rectum. The problem is that when that mucosa stretches, there's nerves that run along the muscles. And what ends up happening is those nerves get pulled. And when those nerves get pulled, they don't know when to work. They don't contract when they should. They don't really message the body that well. So what ends up happening is that they have a very, like, especially with pee, they have a very bladder that's really full. And all of a sudden, right, it spasms, and now you've got an accident.
Yeah.
And it becomes a situation where there might be guilt in there. There might be embarrassment. There's a lot of things that can kind of happen. And so with poop too, it's not that dissimilar of a mechanism. So learning, hey, listen, it's been an hour. Like, you got to go pee. Like, hey, it's been, I had a problem during COVID because there were like 7-year-olds, never had a UTI before, right? And they were on screen during COVID for hours. Whereas normally they would be in one class, they would get up to go to another class. Oh, I have to go pee, right? Get up to, they were literally sitting in the same seat for like 6 hours. Yes, and they would get a UTI because they didn't pee all day, Adults, we do that all the time, right? That happens, right? But because, when we talk about what can you do as a parent, look at your kid. If they haven't peed in like 1 or 2 hours, some way you got to go, you got to pee. So
I'll put a timer so you don't have pressure on you, but like every hour, put a cuckoo clock, right?
Yeah.
Every time the clock is, at least
that's what the original.
It can be part of the fun thing around the potty. Like when you hear that sound, that's your call. That's you're gonna be in control and go by yourself.
At least be reminded, like, are we questioning around the room? Do you need to pee? Do I need to pee? Everybody, no, we're good. Then let's keep going with what we're doing. Like that. Right?
Yeah. So I think it's the UTI situation is a very real thing. It's a real problem, and we almost expect it. Frankly, if you are, especially in girls for whatever reason, it just doesn't. And if you have a UTI while you're potty training, it's actually quote unquote normal for girls. Now, a boy at any point to get a UTI is actually abnormal. A boy should not get UTI. So I don't know. Because there is withholding with boys, and they can get some, but most boys, I don't know, for whatever reason, they don't have as much of a problem.
So for boys, just to, before I think we're going to talk about girls, because as you said, there are something specific to girls, like just the physiology of it. But for boys, there is something that we do in France, which might get very controversial, and I know we had trouble with that here in the US, is something that we call like the country pee, where you just go outside and you go by a tree and you just pee. And we found that, at least I use that with my boy, it's a really great incentive for little boys. I know somebody in the comment was mentioning that her boy was having a hard time. It becomes fun to be like, let's go outside and you can pee outside. And they just, I don't know if it's like the air on their private or just being outside or the fact. So to us, it was a way to get my son being like, oh, that's a fun thing to do and I want to do it. The backslash of that is, you don't want them to do that in school. Because every single French expat who has a kid had that call from school being like, hey, your boy just, was peeing outside in the playground, and now you have to talk to them about, not doing that. So, but to some extent, if you can maybe use some of that to create, as you said, the interest, that has worked for my boy. For being like, hey, I can just, and you play outside on rocks or whatever. So and
break the ice around the big topic.
I mean, it's all about, it's interesting because, again, it goes back to the same idea. Like I'm gonna kind of like force this idea on you, as a parent over and over again. So many times when you're raising them, just close your eyes for a minute. Like, if I was this kid, what would make sense to me? It's just a really kind of like, it's a really kind exercise because, the world looks very different through different eyes. It really does. And what you're describing is that you were like, I know my kid and he would get a kick out of this. Like, he would love it, right? And I'm like, do whatever seems
and
to
the freedom of being like, go outside and pee wherever. It's has that feeling of like being primal, very back to basics of no gear, nothing. I just put my pants down and I'm just gonna pee. And so boys, that's very easy.
Yeah, and on that topic, like when you say like put yourself in your kid's shoes, I think for myself, it's always easier to do it for fun thing. Like, oh, she would love that when you want to buy a toy or do an experience thing. But for things like potty train or things like like big topic and that you have the society like pressure on it, I think we just switch and we are not able to do it. We prefer to follow like the pressure and, you know, to put your kids in a normal frame, like, you know. And it's very a good advice to say, okay, step back, close your eyes, and like you do when you visualize fun thing for your kid, do it for like a big topic. Like that makes sense, because for me, for myself, I realized that for fun things, I'm always like, oh, she would love that.
Right?
I never question myself for potty training or what I put on her plate, what she would like. So that's a
I think it's that kind of thing where, again, like if you don't do it, who else will, right? Like as a parent, you know this kid better than anyone, you know? But I think that so much, I think the reason why I love being a pediatrician is because I love thinking like a kid as much as I can, right? Because I think it does keep you really young. And I think that there should be joy and fun and games in everything that you do. Like there should be that kind of like imagination space, you know? And I think that when we access that information, we really, again, get a beautiful glimpse as to what this kid is about, you know, what is important to them, what makes them laugh, like what makes, so my kid, and again, I just, my kids join these talks sometimes, I don't even know which ones are my husband, so I just love embarrassing them because I just think it's just like so fun. Okay, so because I just can't. And so my son, my husband will attest to this. We are out at playground, we're outside of the older siblings' school, right? And literally he has to pee. Of course he has to pee, right? And we're like 5 blocks from home, right? So my husband's like, fine, do you see the building? Pee on the building. Like we're at the park. Like, what are we gonna do? And he was like, I will not pee on my, you know, siblings, like my older siblings' school. Like I was like, to him, the idea of like, he was like he was gonna be doing graffiti. He was like, no. So they had to walk away. But this same kid, Izzy turned to me one day, and they were in the bath together, and Izzy turns to me and gives me this warm cup. And I was like, what is this? And Izzy turns and says, this is Andre's pee, right? And he's potty training. So I turned to him, I'm like, if you can pee into this cup, right? You can definitely pee into the toilet, right? And again, like, you know, maybe your kid likes to like aim, right? Like when they're in the bath, take a cup and be like, pee into the cup. That's kind of fun. They think that that's a lot of fun. Think of it that way, and that might kind of give them a sense of like, oh, is that all that is? It really, that's all that is. Just peeing into a vessel, you know, that's all that is. But it's a kind of thing where I think that, you know, I think that that's what we should all do for like each other, is try to see what makes sense to them, because in many ways it really is, you know, as I see my kids grow older, they're not that different. Like they're really still that kid, you know, and they're still thinking and learning. But again, one of the things you said earlier was the idea of, you know, showing versus talking, and I think we sometimes over talk about everything. There's always discussions, and there's just so much to be held in kind of like the quietness of example, like just like the quietness of just, you know, leading a life that they understand and that we kind of work through. We talk in this generation of something called performative parenting, where we're always thinking about how do we impress other parents. And it's not something that we want to think about, but it's kind of like you said, cultural. Like there's this whole thing, like I want to be to tell everybody that my kid was potty trained at this age. That shows how wonderful I am. Ridiculous, right? It's like, you know, we've really transitioned from helicopter parenting, where helicopter parenting was a little different. Helicopter parenting was like, I want to focus all my energy on my kids. I'm going to hover with my kids. Everywhere they go, I'm going to be there, right? This is like, I don't care about my kids. I actually want to see, I want everyone else on Facebook, right, to experience how wonderful my family and my life is.
That's also because as parents, there is so much pressure that we want to kind of show off, to say, hey, I'm trying, you know, like I'm doing my best, because we feel like everybody is also scrutinizing what you're doing and trying to do your business because they don't know any better, and making people feel bad about what they do makes also, you know, them feel good because they do better. So it's a whole like
The whole cycle.
Overstimulation of like, I do better, so you do better, so you do better, when the kid is not asking for any of that.
No.
The kid doesn't
So
care of the comparison.
instead of spending that time imagining what other people are thinking about you and your family, spend that time imagining what the world looks like from your kids' eyes. Right? It's the same energy, right? It's the same energy that you're...
Same amount of time too, because a lot of those discussions, sometimes people come back and say, I don't have the time for that. But you're right, there is a lot of time spent to impress, or trying to see what other people are thinking, or trying to see like, what should I do, when that time could be maybe put better into that funnel of, okay, what does the kid want,
what makes sense to this kid, right? What makes sense, you know? And I think it's again, another pivotal moment. I feel like there's just what we haven't done. I think that when we kind of look back on where helicopter parenting, because what helicopter parenting does, it kind of like, it strips away the confidence. When you're doing everything for your kids and making sure that nothing bad happens to them, in many ways, there's no learning. So then they jump out in the world, they're 18 years old, and they're kind of confused as to like, well, what can I do? What am I able to do? Did my parents do that for me, or did I do that? Like, you know, like where was that line? They don't feel it. They can't understand. So then now they're out there, and it sounds terrible, but they're naked. You know, they're out in the middle of, you know, a college campus, or they're out in the middle of the world, and they're like, well, what can I do? Like, oh, by myself, you know? Yeah. And you don't want to send your kids out to the world like that. You know, you want them to feel like they have crossed and like achieved things on their own, maybe with a little bit of your guidance, right? With a lot of your support. But in the end of the day, they're the ones who have to climb that wall.
Yeah, and you right? talked about in the first episode of our series, you talked about the boat, like what we're doing is crafting a boat.
Love that. So
that when the sea come and they can just ride that wave without being like they all just have to swim into the ocean. So and that image kind of stuck to my head, because it is what it is. Just and just putting that mindset in mind of being, okay, I'm just here to craft that boat, meaning I'm not here to to sail the boat. I'm not here to make it pretty. I'm just here. Yeah. It has changed my parenting in the past 4 weeks that I heard that, because I'm like, okay, what I'm doing is just making them to where they can do it themselves. So
yeah, I think that you make a good point, because like people will say, I don't have the time. But the difference is, do I check the boat? Do I sand the boat? Do I make sure that like all the balance of the boat is good, or do I just sit there painting the boat all day, right? Mm-hmm. We were kind of talking about that metaphor, and to me, we spend too much time painting the boat, making it look pretty, tying in a bow, right? It's like, you know, there's just nothing. You know, it's funny because people will say, "Oh, I have such wonderful kids. I'm just so lucky," and I practically jump up from my chair when people say that, and I said, it is not luck. It is blood, sweat, and tears. Like there's no way luck has like this much to do with anything. Like that's crazy, you know. And I think it's, you know, I think the sooner that you recognize that and you kind of give yourself a little bit of that credit, that like, hey, listen, like I am crafting a human being. You know, I think I felt really guilty because my husband and I we would see people kind of get sucked into like child rearing, and you couldn't even have a conversation with them, and you could tell that they were like, just their soul was just like, you know, just like diluting into this. And we were like, we will not be like that. We'll still read newspapers, and we did all these things, and then, you know, we have these wonderful kids, but at the same time, like we're exhausted. Like we're really like we're like just regaining like it's funny when we went to reunions and we see all these people who are like our age, and our kids are around the same age, and we haven't seen each other for 20 years. I mean, it's been a long time, right?
Yeah, since you had kids.
Everybody was hitting that boat,
right? Because we were all busy making the goddamn boat, right? And literally, like we get together and we're like, how are you doing? Are you okay still? Like,
did you make it?
Did you make it? Oh, it's so good to see you. I'm so glad you. I mean, like we have gone through something, And, you know, I was kind of feeling strangely guilty about that, again, because I'm just really good at feeling guilty about a lot of stuff. But I was feeling guilty about that. And I realized, like, what is that? We're exhausted because we actually grew human beings. We actually took a package and we are contributing to the world, right? This package. That's some hard.
That's a lot.
It is.
That's some hard work. So, you know, don't waste your energy trying to make everything look cute.
Yeah.
You know, dressing it up for Facebook. Like, I don't, you know, no, you don't do that, right? It is hard work, and that's the kind of work, the listening, the being present, the just kind of seeing the world from their point of view as much as you can. That allows, that's the foundation. That's the soil.
So back to potty training.
Yes.
We learned something about little girls.
Yes.
So there is this whole, like, for people who now they embark on this journey, they find out how to get it. There are, specifically with girls, sometimes issue with how to wipe properly, how to make all of that properly, because learning takes time, and it is sometimes a little difficult, even for boys to, when they do number 2, and you know how to clean themselves, and so what is your take on that to make that transition as easy and smooth as possible?
So so one thing that first of all, let's do boys. They're easy, right? First of all, they should wipe. I don't know where is this where boys don't wipe. Men don't wipe. I don't know. I'm not even, like, I can't even really speak to that. I don't even know how that happens. So let's just, yes, you should wipe. Like, you should, I mean, like, you know, like walking around, especially in Miami, like if you're in a hot place, but there's a lot of sweat there, right? And so, like, yes, please try to wipe. Anyways, but one of the things that we talked about, because one of the things we talked with your product is that you don't always have, like, it works as a wipe and a barrier. And I find that, you know, rashes and also, like, you know, like infections and everything like that can really be a problem at this age, right? Because they're kind of doing their own thing and it can be a mess. So the one thing that's kind of nice about your product for this stage of their life is that you get a 2-for-1 without them even realizing it. And one of the things that we had talked about is that you can use tissue paper. You don't have to use the wipes that can't be flushed, right? You can just use tissue paper, and, like, you can have the product right next to the bathroom, and they can use that to do their wiping, and then you kind of feel like their skin is also getting taken care of as well, right? That they're not just kind of, so the boys, yes. For the girls, one of the things that I think is really important is that, you know, you have to change their underwear frequently, because, again, there's a little dribble here, a little dribble there, there's a little sweat there, lots of rashing happens. So I love using something like your product to do as a preventative and not just as a treatment, because the more that you kind of keep in a barrier, even more important than when they were babies, because they're kind of doing in their own thing, right? It becomes a situation where they have a hard time getting to where they need to get to. You know, I remember my oldest, when they were wiping, you know, I said, you know, they were getting rashes, and I'm like, where are you wiping? And they literally patted their hip. You're like, and I'm like, how is this? This is the pediatrician's kid, and you think you pee out of your hip? Like, I felt like such a failure on so many levels. And I literally had to be like, no, this is where you pee from. Like, you don't pee from your hip, you know? And if you watch the girls, they have a hard time. Everyone says from the back, right? Like, go from the back. They can't even reach.
Very hard to do.
Yeah, they can't even get there. So literally, you're going to have that whole area just still exposed, you know? So in many ways, you know, you can kind of use, like, you know, you can use a little bit of the product on, like, a tissue paper, and they can use that, but you have them push, like, from the front to the back, obviously, right? And a poop they can kind of do on their own. Like, I mean, you don't have to help them, but they can do from the back. But from the front, pee is, or I often say pat and drop, right? Just pat and drop is not bad. I am a fan. You got a water bottle. We've all got those spray water bottles everywhere, right? You got a little portable bidet there. I know that sounds kind of crazy.
Oh, no,
but
we're French. We're all about bidets.
I don't know. It's funny because, you know, my parents are from Thailand, and my parents always had a bidet in their bathrooms. And I thought that was normal. until I grew up and I realized like Americans think that that's crazy. Like, what is that thing? You know, and they just can't even, you know, they don't, you know, it's very foreign. But in France, bidets are very common, you know. Korea, I mean, I think pretty much everywhere else besides the United States, bidets are actually pretty common. But to me, a portable bidet means that you have a squeezy bottle, right? Not like but a squeezy bottle, and you just spray it a little bit. And then they can use it to like pat and drop with the oil. And I think it works really well, you know?
Yeah.
I think that combination of product gives them a good habit. Obviously, they can't always do it at school. So that's kind of thing that's, you know, so the minute they come back from school, like just get them, you know, like rinsed out, changed out.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of bubble baths for girls for obvious reasons, just because that whole, for boys and girls, just because it's an irritant. So soap should be there and then get it off, you know, because it is an irritant for that area. But the more that you can kind of air that area out, teach them good habits, again, from the front, pat and drop for pee, from the back, poop for girls, I think is the way to go, because it's just, the rationing gets tough. It hurts when they pee. They start to withhold their pee. They get a UTI. Boom, boom, boom. It's not that. it's just one right after another.
And for girls, I know that even when they're potty trained and they're happy, because at some point you're not with them in the bathroom, right? You let them do their things. I know for me, my girl always complained when she was getting to bed at night, is when she was like cooling down, sitting down, she's like, oh, mommy, you know, it hurts. And that's where, again, I was using our own product to be like, that's a little bit of a barrier, which is nice and soft and breathable. And then she would go back to sleep like right away, because she just needed that soothing there. So it's not only what's happening in the bathroom or when they are peeing and pooping, it's also like everything that develops after that. So it's a whole cycle of what's going on, right?
And some people, because it gets irritated, some girls, they'll just have them like sleep without underwear on, you know, just to kind of like air it out. I mean, it's the ventilation of down there is like really essential. And so many girls, I don't know why in Miami, it's so freaking hot. So many of the young girls love wearing tights, you know, like the really, you know, the tight kind of things, and they just know that it's like the style now, but that doesn't air out. Like, you need to air out that area, you know? So
I guess it also doesn't help, and it's a cultural thing, but we were surprised when we got to the US that girls here always have a pair of shorts under their skirts, for example, while in France, every little girl, like just before 6, 7, 8, they have their underwear, and when they sit down, they see their underwear, and everybody's just fine with that, because, you know, that's where underwear is supposed to be. That's why you have underwear. But always having something tightening everything up down there is also like not
tricky,
helping,
right? It's tricky, and so that's why.
And also, for my girl, I realized that the underwear, like mostly in cotton, like good quality of underwear is also helping a lot, because you know, all of the synthetic fabric, it's not helping.
It's not good, and it doesn't air out. I mean, again,
the cotton one are better for my experience.
And the thing that's a little bit annoying too is that they grow. So like, make sure that when, you know, if they're having trouble putting on the underwear because it's too tight, it's time to go back to Target and just get, you know, some other underwear, you know? But I think the barrier piece of it, maybe mixed with a little bit of the bidet piece, you know, I think is a really good way to kind of keep that area from getting irritated during the potty training. You know, the potty training is complicated because it just requires, this is, again, just an incredible, like, you know, with the food, same idea. Like, they have to actually chew the food and swallow it. So, like, you start to feel like, okay, I've got to give them some of that independence, right? It's, I think that the evolution of your life with this child is in these incremental steps, so that it prepares you, right? For when you have to kind of give big decisions, like, okay, I guess you are going to go to France for the summer by yourself. I mean, like, you know, that eventually has to be, right, a decision that's made. So, you know, this is a good exercise as you as a parent to be, okay, well, these are the things that you're going to do, you know, to kind of make sure this is the responsibility that I'm putting on for you, for your life. And, you know, there might be consequences. Maybe you don't do it, and then you get a rash, and they're like, oh, so this happens, you know, this is how we kind of try to prevent it. Again, just trying to always focus on the positive versus like, I'm going to punish you because this happened. It's like, This is actually not
I think
that,
a lot of the
you know?
punishing sometimes happen, and I know I'm guilty of that, is trying to put the fear of the punishment so that we don't have to deal with like the falling in the first place, and trying to prevent, because we know from experience that if we go this route, we're going to deal with a rash, or we're going to deal with like a hitchy, you know, private part. If you go my route, it's going to be an efficient one. And sometimes my desire for efficiency make them not experience why I got to this conclusion.
Right.
So
So again, just to circle back to what we said from the very beginning, right, is that sometimes actions and consequences speak more than words.
Exactly.
Because not that I want your kid to get an UTI, I'm
Yeah.
But it's a kind of thing where it's like you can draw that line without being kind of like you're judging them, but you can be like, listen, like, you know, one of the reasons why I do this is so that you don't get a rash, but you have a rash now. It hurts, right? It's not fun, right? It's not a good rash. So let's see, maybe next time we can try to prevent it by like doing this. And then they start to kind of draw that line, right? I think the hard thing that came out of helicopter parenting is that consequences do not exist.
Yeah.
And in the end of the way, consequences are the way that we learn, right? Mistakes, pain, and sport. It is what it is. It's just the human way. You can tell all you want, right? I can read book after book after book, right? But the consequences in the end speak volumes. That actually is what you remember. Like, yeah, that sucks. Like, I don't want that to happen.
And I mean, it's better for them to experience pain and failure when they are small, that you can guide them and support them. And when they will be on this boat, they will be able to face and understand that failure is okay. And if you get some emotion, it's better for them to have it like when they are small.
And they are in your house, and they are within control of stuff that you can repair. Like it's not the bigger problem of older kids that may deal with experiencing stuff and boundaries later in life when the risk is even bigger, right?
And I would say it just to kind of, again, be catchy, that, you know, I would rather it be me than your boss, right? Because the boundary will be there. You will feel a consequence, right? If you have, something will happen, right? But in the end of the day, I would rather be giving it to you in small doses and letting you kind of understand that. And then, like, actually, you know, to me, and again, it's just something that I'm still crafting, even with kids who are, you know, in college. It's hard for me. It's hard for any parent to watch your kids kind of like not get what you think they should get or achieve. And in many ways, it's their journey, it's their life, it's their way that they have to kind of learn. And that, I have to tell you, I'm still learning. I'm still working on that. It's still so hard because, again, I think that, you know, it's funny because my husband's father was like a teacher, and, you know, he would tell my husband, you know, you didn't do well on this test. Do better. You should do better, because if you don't, then, you know, you may not get into a college, and, you know, it's going to be tough for you. You see, nothing in that comment was like, you know, you'll make me, you know, sad, right? Like, you know, I'm going to be disappointed in you. It wasn't. It was just like, this is just the truth of it, right? You know, you don't wipe after you pee. You're going to have a rash. You know, you could decide. Like, it's kind of like, to me, that final step of saying, like, you decide how you want this to go, I think is kind of something that we have to practice.
Well, and also, because when you give them, you know, option A, option B, and have them decide, I feel like kids never, I hear that with my kids many times. They never say, I'm not deciding. They want to decide. Whatever. And sometimes they decide the thing where it's like, really? That's what you pick? Like, you make something very difficult, something super easy. I'm going to go the hard route. Okay, whatever.
Exactly.
Then you want to prove a point. Like, I think that, I'm going to run with that. You're like, okay, whatever.
But you're absolutely right. They want a piece of it. They do want a piece of it. And I think that that's something that we started ignoring that. Right. And, you know, they have this whole thing with like toddlers, you know, like the more that you can give them to decide and hold on to, like they become prouder. There's like a certain something to it, you know, and I think that we underestimated how important that one step was. Because we do have a lot of kids right now who are older, who are filled with anxiety and fear because they're like, I don't know what I can do. Like, can I do this by myself? I'm not sure. I've never done this by myself, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that that's not fair. That's not fair. Yeah, maybe we made it, like you said, more convenient, a little easier for us when they were younger, right? By saying, like, I guarantee, don't do it this way because this is what's going to happen, right? That was easier for us, right? Instead of watching them actually go through it. That's a lot easier for us. But in many ways, it cuts their legs and then you send them out, right? It's as if you took their ship and you just punched a big hole in it and you're like, let's see what that ship starts doing. Right? Enjoy that.
It's not fair.
Okay. It's not fair. It's not fair. So,
and all those little choices, I think potty training, beside the end goal of having them being potty trained, is a great opportunity to bring those choices, like which underwear do you want, the pink or the blue, or like which, I don't know, do you want to sit on the toilet or do you want to sit on the potty, do you want the potty in this room or in that room, and all of these are decisions, so that if there is a point where one thing you have to decide for them, they're probably going to be willing to listen to that because they decided 10 things before they get to a point of like, now you have to pee.
I will tell you that the more headstrong your kid is, the more that you better back off, because I have seen headstrong kids and literally they'll drag the whole thing. And I just keep telling the parent, I'm like, you got to back off because they'll do it when they're ready. Yeah. And sure enough, those are the kids that potty train the fastest. Like literally from Friday to Sunday, they just decided that weekend, right? That they were going to train, right? Versus you, right? Dragging them for like months, right?
And probably the more you push, the more they're like, you're not going to make it just like we do it.
That's their way to control something that they,
It reminds me of that kid that refuses to eat if you feed them, but if you let them touch the food and feed themselves, they eat forever. Like there are just some kids who are like, this is just the way that my, this is the way I'm programmed. Yeah, this is the way this is the way I'm like threaded. This is the way that I'm like wired. And I have to tell you, that kid doesn't change. Like, I can't have fun in 6th grade. Like, enjoy, right? Because this is not a one-off. This is the same freaking kid, And I think that's the reality, that like you do get a glimpse and you're like, okay. And I think it's good because, when my kids were a teenager, like especially in high school, I felt so overwhelmed. And the whole time I kept looking in the mirror. You know how you have to manifest something this generation? I was like, I have been training for this. I am ready for this. I can do it, because it's true. Like I have been trained at various junctions in their life. I have been like doing this dance. I've been training, right, to be the best parent that I could be for them at that time. So like you are just getting information, you're giving information, you're setting out that foundation so that when you hit that ground and now you're really like, now you can see the ocean, you're about ready to push this ship out to the ocean. You're like, okay, yeah, I got you. I'm ready. Like we've got a good ship here,
And with that being said, you also have to, as you said, it's a training for parents as well. We are all learning along the way. So we also need to accept and give grace to ourselves if we do make mistakes. Like if somebody is listening right now and had a less than ideal experience with potty training with their first kid, it's okay, right? It's a piece of who you are, and you probably have learned from that. Your kids have learned from that. You've learned to be a better parent for the next time something comes up. So don't feel, let that guilt out of the way, so that you can move on and be like, okay, that was part of my own learning, because nobody's trained to be a parent. So it's okay to make mistakes, to fail with your kid, without your kid, and then just, move on and continue building that boat.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. This is the first time we're a parent. This is the first time they're a kid. So like, as long as you recognize, like you said, like, again, just to go back to the performative parenting, right? The mistakes are learning experiences. They're not things to be embarrassed about. They're not things that you hide, that you want to make sure that nobody knows. No, like the mistakes are actually learning experiences.
Yeah.
And the same way that, like, if you had a really bad potty training experience for yourself, like, you know, your parents were really hard on you and you struggled with your bowels for a long time, that is great information for how you want to address your kids. So listen, we only learn from mistakes, honestly. We don't always learn from success. We learn really from mistakes. So like mistakes are just basically an opportunity. Like, again, the times that I've been proudest of myself as a parent was started with some mistake I made. Like, that's where I learned, like, oh yeah, I got to work on that, you know? And then when you do it, you're like, okay, I've been listening. I'm good. You know, I've been present, and that's all you can ask for yourself.
That's a good closing note.
Yeah, just if we have to give some tips just to make like a recap of everything we said. So the best tips for potty training would be to take time.
Yes.
Don't feel the pressure of the society.
Yeah.
Listen to your kids because they know when they will be ready.
Yeah.
Try to organize that, to choose like a right period in your life, not holidays if you're gonna travel. So try to think ahead a little bit of how you're gonna organize that things.
Yeah.
Try to do not punish and prefer rewards for them. That would be a good thing. And try to give them choice.
Choice and options.
And they're gonna, with choice, they're gonna feel that they have control. So
and
that's
from
what
their
I remember, and we try to apply. And also you said, and I think it's very important for people who have several kids, do not compare kids. Because every kids are different, and something that worked for your first one may not work for your second one.
Yeah, and that's not a failure. Like, that's not like, you know, you didn't fail or something. That's just the way that you know, this is the way this game works, is that you don't, no repeats, you know, like everything is like no repeats.
Our final question for you, which is the one we always want to get back to, is like, when is it worrisome? Like, when does it come from, like, oh, we're talking to, okay, now we need to do something and consult like a pediatrician or any kind of like professional. What are the alarming signs?
I think that, you know, where we start to have a little bit problem, both because they can't go into school so well, right, is really the 4 or 5 year olds, right? But even starting with 3, if you're finding that, like, they have they almost can't control it, like they actually have some bowel issues. You know, don't always chalk that up to potty training, right? That might actually be that they don't evacuate fully. They're not really able to control their bowels. So when it feels like, you know, I think, you know, at 3 to 4 is when you start to kind of be like, okay, is there something more, right? Like, you know, the playfulness doesn't work, you know, a lot of things. But I think that by 4, if you're like really, you're not getting any headway, like, then you should, you know, really have a discussion with your doctor, whether they see GI or see urology, because, you know, at that age, they should be really kind of getting the memo. And I'll be honest with you, there are some kids who will pee, but then they need the diaper to potty, right? To poop. And I find that sometimes, especially when I have situations where constipation has been an issue or withholding has been an issue, I will accommodate that. You know, I will say accommodate that for a couple more months, right? Until we get, because the last thing you want them to do is start withholding again.
Yeah.
So they'll play that game. It's not unusual for them to do one and then maybe not the other. You know, so it's like you kind of have to be flexible. And just to add what you were going through, Fanny, I mean, I think the thing, again, this is just a great opportunity to see the world from their perspective and be playful. Some of it is actually kind of fun. So you know, have that positive outlook with it, and you know, it can be a great learning and fun experience, strangely.
So we open with that, we're going to close with that. So potty training can be beautiful. See, that was my first comment. She was right from the get-go.
I still have 1 kid to potty train, so sorry. I was like,
but you feel like a hero, right?
So share with us. Thank you everybody for joining. Share with us your successful or your unsuccessful potty training experience. As you know, Fanny and I are the pee and poop expert. We love everything around pee, poop, diaper, all that good stuff. So we're going to post that live onto our social media. Feel free to share with your friend or whoever you think could benefit from it. And I also put the link to our product, which you refer to, which is our wiping lotion for toddlers, which is fantastic assistant to potty training. So we'll put that in there as well. Thank you very much, Dr. Perlman.
We need to make a La Petite Creme portable bidets.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
with our face on it.
yeah.
How about that? That sounds perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day.
Bye.